Greetings, welcome back to Minecraft. Some of the most common questions I get asked on these videos are things like, what shaders do you use? What mods do you use? Are you human? So today, I will be answering all of these questions and more in this complete breakdown of my mods, my game settings, and how I play Minecraft to be able to do the things that I do. I made 2 videos like this in the past, but things have changed a lot since then. And this time, I want to go more in depth in how I use my mods and what I use them for, instead of just like giving you a list of what they are and what they do. So to make this video as comprehensive as possible, I'll break it up into 3 sections. Performance mods that pretty much everybody should use no matter how casual of a player you are. Aesthetic mods that only change the way things look in the game but don't alter any gameplay itself. And then finally, utility mods that improve the quality of life for day-to-day gameplay but are highly dependent on your individual playstyle and preferences. All these mods will have links in the description. Here's a simple list of them if that's all you were looking for and you just want to pause the video and take a screenshot or something. And here's all the timestamps for the start of each section and the timestamps for the breakdown for each mod. So if you want to jump to a specific point in the video where I cover a specific mod, there you go. And quick disclaimer, even though I'm sure most of you know this is for the Java edition of Minecraft. Bedrock players can probably get some of these mods too, or at least similar ones, but you'll likely need to refinance your home or start putting in overtime at work to be able to afford them. Anyway, before we get to what mods I use, first we need to cover how do I get them and how do I load them. To load all these mods, I use Fabric. It's the only mod loader I've ever used, so if you use Forge, Quilt, or any other loader, some of these mods might work for you. They have multiple versions, but some won't. It shouldn't really be too hard to find guides online for the other loaders, but if you want to use everything I use in the exact same way, make sure you're on Fabric. Now, to get the mods I use, I currently exclusively use the website Modrinth. It's pretty much the #1 source for Minecraft mods, and everything I currently have, I got from there. Also, on a side note, I use a third-party Minecraft launcher called Prism instead of the default Minecraft launcher. This doesn't have any impact on modding or anything whatsoever, but I thought I'd mention it because of how useful I found it compared to the default Minecraft launcher. Accessing and navigating my folders is extremely convenient, and it can be done with the click of a button instead of having to go through the run command. So to load mods, all I have to do is click folder, Minecraft, and mods. Then I just drag any jar file I want into here, and boom, easy mod management. I also have the ability to run more than one Minecraft instance at a time, meaning if I want to AFK a farm in my hardcore world, and then I want to like, I don't know, design something in my creative world, I can run 2 Minecrafts at the same time and do that. It's super convenient for stuff like that, assuming your computer can handle it. So there you go. That's how I play Minecraft, where I get my mods, and how I install them. If you're confused in any way and you just are new to modding in general, watch a different video that kind of explains modding. This isn't exactly a tutorial, okay? Now, in the future, if I stop using any of the mods I explain in this video or I start using new ones, I'll detail those updates in the description. So if you're watching this months or years from now, make sure you check down there for any updates or changes that have been made. But anyway, here we go. Section 1, performance mods. These are mods that I pretty much think everybody should be using. They make your game run smoother, have higher FPS, faster chunk loading, and all around just improve the Minecraft experience no matter what you're doing. And I don't really play on any servers really, but I'm pretty sure that most of these mods are allowed on most servers since they don't impact gameplay whatsoever. They just make things run faster, but don't quote me on that. If you get banned for having some mods on some shit, it's not my fault, okay? Okay, mod number 1 isn't actually a performance mod, but you're gonna need it anyway to manage all your mods, and that is mod menu. This does exactly what you think. It's just a menu listing all of your mods. This is literally the mod. It allows you to access everything, and if there's any configuration settings for any of the mods, you can access them through here, although some of them do have dedicated hotkeys to access their menus depending on what type of mod it is. But you're gonna need it to organize stuff, so make sure you get it. It has a bunch of options to filter whatever you want and have it look however you want, although I've never really played with any of these. Okay, mod number 2, the first actual performance mod, is Sodium. This mod completely replaces parts of Minecraft's vanilla rendering engine, which gives you a significant FPS boost, improves chunk loading times, and all around just provides a much smoother gameplay experience from vanilla alone. It also overhauls your graphic settings screen to look a little bit like this, although I think I am behind a version. I think it looks even better than how it looks here now, but it just kind of gives you more information on what every setting does, so you can kind of find the best settings for your device depending on, you know, how powerful your machine is. I'll quickly go through all my settings, although there really isn't much to it. I play on a NASA PC, so I have 32 render distance and I keep high frames with that. Although I only have my simulation chunks to 16 because I realize if I have it at 32, sometimes I'll get stuttering, which is a little bit annoying. And also, you really don't need, like, when do I ever need anything higher than 16? Unless I have a redstone machine that spans like 500 blocks or whatever. Here's my quality settings, here's my performance settings, and here's my advanced settings. The only 2 things I want to point out is make sure your entity distance is on 100. I mean, it can be anything really, but I play on 100 because that lets me see things pretty much at any normal range. I'm not trying to look at a sheep that's that's like at this desert way down here. And anything higher than this just adds unnecessary lag for pretty much no reason. And also ensure that use block face culling is on. What this does is disables the rendering for sides of blocks that you can't see, which you'll never notice in game, but it will provide a pretty big FPS boost compared to not using it. But that pretty much does it for sodium. For performance mod number 2, we've got something similar to sodium, and that is lithium. Lithium replaces some of vanilla Minecraft's processing logic to optimize performance for all types of entities. That's mobs, block entities like chests, redstone logic, anything the game has to continuously process like an action for. This reduces the amount of in-game lag you experience when dealing with a lot of entities, like this giant shulker mob switch, for example, or a giant storage system that I may or may not be working on. You didn't see that. But unlike sodium, this mod has no like settings options or anything that you have to tweak. It's just one of those mods that you install and it automatically just optimizes those processes without any player interaction or anything like that. So definitely another must-have, even if you don't really work with redstone machines or anything like that very much. Next up for mod number 3, we have entity culling. Similar to the block face culling setting in sodium, what entity culling does is when you can't see a mob or an entity, the game simply doesn't render or process it. Which means if you're dealing with a lot of entities in one area, maybe you've got a farm for sheep or cows, or you have a lot of villagers in a trading hall or something, it will drastically reduce lag in those types of situations. Now, it does have an option for tick culling, which I haven't done a lot of testing for because it's not really relevant for me personally, but I think this can interfere with certain farms that require mobs to move around and stuff. Or if you have a chest boat that's being filled with items from a hopper or something like that, this may interfere with it, and it's on by default, so I turn it off. But this really depends and can be personalized for your situation. They have a whole list where you can individually skip the tick culling for those specific entities. I have a strong enough machine that this really doesn't matter for me too much, but if you really want to min-max your performance here, you can sort through this and find out what you want to skip and what you don't. But whether tick culling is on or off, you're still going to get a performance boost regardless, but that performance boost is going to vary pretty heavily depending on how many entities you play with. If you got a bunch of pets in your base or something like that, you're going to see more of a performance boost. But if you don't really play with a bunch of extra animals or anything like that, you're going to see less of a performance boost. But the way I see it, a performance boost is a performance boost, so you're better off having it than not having it. All right, next up, we've got a mod called Ferrite Core. What this mod does is reduces the strain on your system's RAM, which can boost a lot of chunk loading times and FPS. I'm not super sure on the technical details of this mod. I'm not a CS major, and there's no special menus or anything like that, kind of like with Lithium. But what I do know is you're going to get more use out of this mod if you have like a very intensive mod pack versus if you're just playing with less mods. But it's another one of those things where you're just kind of better off having it than not having it. I'm sure there's some like niche scenarios where it's probably not good to have, but I've noticed that my chunks do load quicker with it. So another one of those things you just might want to try. All right, next up, we've got immediately fast. There is a chunk update setting in the performance tab called immediate, which eliminates visual lag by blocking the frame until the chunk updates are completed, which basically means nothing in the game world itself will lag, but instead your FPS will lag more. And so to alleviate that trade-off a little bit, immediately fast makes it just more efficient at loading that. Again, I don't know the technical end very much, but it just makes your frames faster when using that mode. So this is kind of personal preference, honestly. And again, depends on your machine, but I kind of like not having visual lag. I'd prefer everything I'm seeing on my screen to be accurate with the world. And the visual lag would be like, imagine you're on a super laggy server and you break a block and you have to like wait for it to break. Here, I'll throw up some example of what I'm talking about. Basically, you won't have that problem, and instead you'll just have FPS lag instead. Now, this is a newer mod for me. I haven't really been using it that long, so I haven't noticed too much of a difference, but I do definitely feel as I'm flying through areas, loading chunks and unloading chunks behind me, things feel a bit smoother. Usually if I get into an area and let's say I load in a ton of entities for some reason, I do notice a little skip without this mod, whereas with the mod, I don't really notice it. Pretty much impossible to show on video. You kind of have to be playing the game to experience it, but like the last couple mods, it's another one of those things that it's just better to have, as long as you have that specific setting enabled. All right, and to wrap up here, the last mod on the list for performance mods doesn't impact performance directly, but after using it one time, it reduces lag a ton, and that is Chunky. What this mod does is pre-generate chunks in your world, as loading chunks for the first time is a very laggy process since your computer is basically building those chunks from the world seed, whereas entering chunks that have already been loaded is significantly less laggy. It just has to basically open it up, right? It's not generating anything new. And so if you've been playing in a world for a while where you already have a ton of chunks loaded, you may not need this mod, but if you're loading a world for the first time and you want it to be lag-free as you explore, you can use this mod by first setting the center radius of the area you wish to load, and you do this with the command /chunky center, and then the X and Z coordinates of the circle you want to load around. Then once you have that set, you use the command /chunky radius, and then the number of blocks you want to be the radius of that circle. If you want to use chunks instead of block, simply type out the number and place a C at the end, but be careful, okay? One chunk is 16 blocks. So if you make the circle astronomically huge, you don't want to confuse yourself wondering why it's going to take 40 years to load your world, and also make the file size fill up your entire hard drive. But once you have those settings enabled, the center and the radius, simply type /chunky start and then the dimension that you're in. And then you can go to bed, because if you made the radius you want to load really big, this is going to take a while. But if you made it too big, or you just want to stop because you want to exit the world for some reason, you can simply type /chunky pause, which will pause the process, but it won't cancel it. You can unpause at any time and continue loading chunks. If you want to cancel the process entirely and just wipe it out and completely reset, you can type /chunky cancel. Out of all the performance mods, this one's probably the least useful, as I'm sure many of you already have your own worlds, but whenever you do start out a new world, it's nice to have. Now that pretty much does it for the performance mods I use, but a few more I want to mention are the mods Yet Another Config Lib, the Fabric API, and Cloth Config. These are dependencies that are used by other mods in order to display things like setting screens, and it's really good to just have them to avoid any potential compatibility issues with any of the other mods in this video. Now, before we move on, here's a quick comparison between the vanilla game's performance with no mods whatsoever and how the game performs with all the mods. As you can see, pretty fucking good. All right, now let's move on to section 2, the aesthetic mods. Just like with the performance mods, these mods do nothing to alter gameplay itself. They only provide a visual change to make things look a lot prettier. And no mod makes the game look prettier, in my opinion, than the first mod on our list, Voxy. Voxy is a render distance mod that uses lower level of detail renders to extend your visual render distance to these insane amounts. This mod is similar to the Distant Horizons mod, which I'm sure a lot more of you have heard of, but the difference is this mod loads way faster, and for the LODs, the textures used are the vanilla block textures instead of the flat kind of grainy colored textures of Distant Horizons, which makes it look a whole lot better. The chunks are almost indistinguishable from the normally rendered chunks. Unless you're looking really close, you can kind of tell the difference. Now, in order to use this mod, first you need to generate all of the chunks that you see before they can be rendered with the mod. You can do this obviously by using Chunky, which I just showed you guys how to do in the last section. And once you have all of the chunks generated that you want to render with the mod, simply type /Voxy import world and then the name of your world. And boom, it'll automatically generate the LODs for you. Although it might take a while depending on how powerful your PC is and how many chunks you're rendering. Again, similar to Chunky. There's actually a tab for Voxy settings in the normal video settings that you get from Sodium. So you can enable or disable the mod. You can enable or disable just the rendering of the mod, which might be useful if you want to update the LOD chunks but not actually have them displayed. You can change the render distance. I have them set right now at 384. I think I honestly should have it at 256. Nah, 384 is fine. But you start to get pretty quick diminishing returns with how far you can see just based on, you know, how seeing works, right? So like look at the distance here versus when I give it 2048 chunks. It's a lot more, but like, am I really getting that much more? I'd have to fly really high up to see everything else I just loaded. And I'm taking kind of an unnecessary performance hit, although it's not that bad by doing that. So, you know, what was it at? 384? That's good enough for me. The pixel subdivision setting changes for how detailed the terrain is based on distance. So like right here, you can see each individual block of the LOD, but as you get further out, well, actually that's another thing the mod does. When you are looking with a zoom at a location, it'll actually update the LOD to a higher level of detail. But when you're not zoomed in, it's kind of hard to show because I'm not zoomed in. The level of detail is actually smaller. So it'll clump blocks together. Like let's say 4 blocks will be rendered as one larger block to save resources on your computer. So this is the setting you're definitely going to want to tweak to find a performance that works for you. Again, super powerful NASA PC for me. So I get pretty good performance with really nice settings. You can also turn on and off the environmental fog, which I like to keep on. Gives you this slight haze effect, which some of you might not like, but if you turn it off, I think it just looks, I don't know how to explain it, flat, like unnatural. You know, in real life, when you're looking across far distances, there's going to be a little bit of haze from water vapor, clouds, rain, whatever, right? This is very not realistic and not very immersive, but to each their own. Typically, I'll turn off this mod if I'm like working on a big build and I'm not necessarily looking out into the distance. But if I'm kind of just like generally playing, I'm flying around between farms, I'm getting materials, I'm looking for something, I like to keep it on. Makes navigation easier because I kind of know exactly where everything is, and it helps create like a mental image of my world. Like I pretty much know exactly what my world looks like from memory and where everything is from memory, which I feel is something that's kind of hard to grasp without a mod like this. And I mean, it just looks amazing too. All right, anyway, the next aesthetic mod I use is Iris. This is the mod required to load shaders whenever I use them, which is pretty rare, but this is the mod to do that. Once you've installed the mod in your folder and you've ran the game at least once, you should have a folder appear in your Minecraft folder called shader packs, and here is where you'll place any shader packs before you can load them in game. Currently, the shaders I use are Photon, and the only reason I use Photon is because this one actually has support for the Voxy mod. So if I turn it on, not only do I get beautiful shaders, but I also get them at insane distances like this. Just don't zoom in though. The shading kind of breaks at this distance. But I mean, look at this, bro. Isn't this beautiful? It does kind of turn my game into a little bit of a slideshow. I'm getting like, how many frames am I getting here? 60? Okay, that's low for me, all right? Listen, I know that's high for some. That's pretty low for me, okay? Unplayable. Can't play like this. But I really only use shaders for like fancy renders anyway when I'm doing big time lapses or I'm showing off a build. I'm not really playing the game normally like this. I prefer the, you know, classic Minecraft feel. Now, obviously, you don't have to use this shader pack. There's tons out there. Like I said, the only reason I'm using this one specifically is because it's compatible with Voxy. If it wasn't compatible with Voxy or every shader was compatible with Voxy, I'd probably use a completely different one. But you know, it's all personal preference. Just find your own shaders or use this one. I don't care. Do whatever you want. I'll quickly skim through some of the basic settings for this shader pack. I really haven't changed much. I think the only thing I've adjusted is some of the color settings because there's different color grading depending on the biome you're in. So real quick, here's all my settings. Just pause the video on what you want to look at. There you go. And I think I've tweaked some of the cloud settings as well. But if you want the exact settings, I'll leave the config file in my Discord, which you can find in the frequently asked questions section, where you can also find a bunch of other information that's kind of covered in this video. But check there if you want the exact settings. And speaking of changes to clouds, the next aesthetic mod is Better Clouds. This mod does exactly what it says. It gives you better clouds. I absolutely love this mod. Voxy and this mod are probably my two favorites. I think these just look 100 times better than the vanilla clouds. Vanilla clouds are so freaking lame. Like, it's just like the most basic squares ever, where these are still squares, you know, it's still very Minecraft-y, but it's just a lot more realistic. They just feel like real clouds. There's also a ton of customization options for this mod, which I've played around with a good bit. So I'll quickly scroll through these settings so you can copy them verbatim if you want. I think the main thing I changed was I made them clump in these like bigger sections and also be a little bit more spread out from each other, because I didn't like I thought the scattered kind of smaller clouds looked a little more, just didn't look as good. I think this is a lot more like realistic, I guess. Now, tragically, development for this mod was discontinued by the original developer pretty recently, which means it won't get updated for newer versions. But from what I've seen, there are other devs who are interested in taking over development for this mod. So hopefully it will continue to receive updates as Minecraft updates in the future. Please don't let this mod die. And now, while the Better Clouds mod and the Voxy mod changed so much for the actual world, what really ties it all together is the next aesthetic mod, simply no shading. This is the most basic mod in the world, but it does so much. It simply removes the side shading of blocks. I think this is what people are referring to when they ask me what shaders I use, because it makes the game look so much brighter without actually changing any color settings or anything like that. Like, there's not any added vibrance or brightness or anything like that. It's just the removal of the side tinting of the blocks. It also has 3 different options for this, so you can do it just for the blocks, you can do it for the blocks and the entities, or you could do it for the clouds. Obviously, clouds don't really matter because it doesn't interact with the Better Clouds mod, so that setting's kind of useless for me. And for entities, I leave it normal. I leave the normal shading, because if I turn it off and we come down here and take a look at this pig and this donkey, as you can see, the colors that are the same, there's no clear distinction between like the top of the donkey and the side of it. So you can get these weird situations where it just doesn't really look good. If you look at the firework and the totem in my hands too, you see the same thing. You can't like see the edge unless it's on the outside. So I don't really like that. I think it just makes it like kind of hard to look at stuff. And so I keep the entity shading on. But for blocks, look at this. It just looks like the graphics are worse. I don't really know how to explain it. It just looks like the graphics are bad. I know I'm like saying that about Minecraft of all things, but you get what I mean. Isn't this just so much better? But for the animals, it's fine. And speaking of animals, you may have noticed these pigs are walking around kind of funny, and so am I, and that is due to the Fresh Animations resource pack. Technically, this one's not a mod, it's a resource pack, but to make the resource pack work with Fabric, you need to download 2 mods, Entity Texture Features and Entity Model Features. These are the 2 required to support the resource pack. And then you can install the resource pack like you normally would, just through the resource pack folder. I have the base Fresh Animations, the Emissive Textures add-on, and the Player add-on. So this is what makes me move around like this, all expressively, you know, way better in my opinion than just the normal vanilla Minecraft movement. That's all very, you know, static and robotic. But for the rest of the mobs, I actually went into the resource pack itself and manually deleted a bunch of the mobs except for this list here. And that's because I really didn't like the expressive movements on most of the mobs, because I kind of see mobs in this game as tools or resources rather than like these, you know, living creatures that I want to give emotions to. You know, the purpose of a sheep is not to wander around grazing grass. It's to sit in a 1x1 cube and be farmed of its wool for eternity. You understand? understand me, bud. But any mobs that I can ride, so donkeys, the occasional pig, my little horse, and any pets like dogs and cats or whatever, they can have all the animations because their job is literally to, you know, be cute and look cool versus being points of resources that I can exploit for eternity. Although I did break that rule with the happy gas. The happy gas is normal and doesn't have the effect. The fresh animation effect on the happy gas makes it do this weird, like kind of sideways wobbling thing, which is kind of doesn't make any sense. And I want the happy gas to be still and not move when I'm using it, since it's more of a tool itself rather than like a form of transportation or a pet. So obviously all of that is just personal preference. I mean, I'm sure if you guys like the mobs moving how they're supposed to, they'll just leave it the same. But again, do whatever you want. All right, next up, we've got particle rain. The normal Minecraft rain looks super ugly and only serves to make the game worse, and I always try to avoid it when I can. But this mod completely fixes that by making it significantly less obtrusive, as you can see, and also have some more realistic effects. It's kind of angled, blowing in the wind a little bit. It gives these little puddle effects when the rain hits the water, and it also affects weather in different biomes too. So for snow, each snowflake has a little bit more of a unique motion to it, although I didn't really mind the vanilla snow, but this looks really nice. And in deserts, it even has its own custom effect too, which I actually keep off because I don't really like it that much. But this is what it looks like when it's on. It's just like a dust effect, which I think is not really necessary, to be honest. There's a ton of customization options for this mod too. I've tweaked a couple of them, like obviously disabling certain things, but it's really all personal preference. And so I suggest just playing around with it until you find the settings you like. And now, while particle rain overhauls how the rain looks in this game, the next mod, cool rain, overhauls how it sounds. So typically Minecraft rain only has like that one audio that plays while it's raining, but with cool rain, it adds custom sounds depending on what blocks are being hit by the rain. So if you listen for a sec, you can hear like the metal kind of metallic sounds as it hits these metal rods and the lantern here. It sounds different hitting dirt as it does to hitting stones. It's pretty subtle, but it adds a whole lot to the immersion. I actually prefer when it rains now in a lot of scenarios if I'm kind of just like, you know, in a scenic area. It just feels so much more realistic and less obtrusive. It adds like a level of coziness and realism that you don't really get normally. There's no special settings for this mod or anything. It just overhauls the sounds automatically, and it goes super well with the particle rain mod. Next up, we've got continuity. This is the mod that's required for all the connected glass textures you see in my world, and also the connected sea lantern textures. Similar to the fresh animations mod, this mod itself doesn't connect the textures, but allows you to get resource packs that do connect the textures. The mod alone comes with the resource packs for the glass connected, glass sandstone bookshelves built into continuity, so you don't really need an extra resource pack for these two. But it also enables you to do things like connect sea lanterns, which you don't need specifically this pack for. I'm pretty sure I found this pack just by Googling connected sea lanterns texture pack. So you don't really need this one specifically. Just make sure you get one that is compatible with continuity. I'll try to find the link of this one and put it in the description, but if I can't find it, I'll link a different one. But this mod is definitely another must-have in my opinion. I cannot imagine playing. In fact, let's see. Let's disable it really quick, and oh, it's disgusting. Dude, I honestly think Mojang in a future update should make a setting where you can automatically connect stuff like this. They'd probably have to change some stuff on the rendering engine side, so it might be a little bit of a technical challenge, but it just looks so much worse like this. Like in real life, this is not what glass looks like. Like I understand there has to be a little bit of a border, you know, to be able to see the block. It can't be 100% clear, but I mean, come on, it just does not look good. Let's turn that back on real quick. But that's the entire mod. It's pretty simple. It does have a couple settings just to enable and disable its features, but there's nothing too complicated about it. Next up, we've got another simple mod that you guys have probably noticed a little bit of, and that is day counter. This thing in the top left of my screen right here. It does exactly what it says. It just counts the days you've been in your world. It has a decent amount of options, honestly. You can disable and enable the day count. You can offset the value, so it's set ahead by 1 because Minecraft worlds start on day 0, and I think it makes more sense to start on day 1. So technically I'm on day 9,900, but I have it offset to correct for that. You can change the size of it, although I think the default value is good enough. You can change where it's positioned. I have it moved slightly, I think. You can change the color, which is nice, but I'm cool with just the normal white. And you can change the text that comes before it. So it just says day and then the number of days, but I could change it to something like days survived. And then it changes to that, although that's way too much text. So we'll stick with just day. One thing I wish you could do with this mod is add commas. So it would be day 9,000,901. I just think it looks cooler having commas separating every 3 digits, but unfortunately you can't do that. If anyone knows how to do that on like some technical level, let me know. Next up, we've got discontinuous beacon beams. What this mod does is hide the beacon beams when a block of glass is placed over them, but it doesn't disable the beacon. It just hides the beam itself. This is how I make all these little beacon pylons scattered around my world, as I want to have the effects of the beacon pretty much everywhere that I have stuff built, but I don't want a trillion beams shining into the sky and polluting the world. As you can see, that doesn't look too great. Although now that I think about it, I've never looked at my world like this. This is crazy. But yeah, we definitely don't want that. In the settings, there's a bunch of different options for how you want the enabling and disabling to work, and you can add any block in the game game to the list of blocks that disables or enables them. Although, I mean, why would you want to add a block that the beacon can't shine through anyway? This basically needs to be transparent blocks like slabs, stairs, glass, etc. But most people, including myself, are probably just good with just the glass. And how many times you can start and stop the beacon effect has no limit. So let's say you want to shine a beacon through one section, but then stop it through another. You can do that by just alternating blocks. So if you want a beacon to shine through the center of a room, you can do that and then stop for another room and then start again at the top. And you can do this as much as you like. So there's a lot of flexibility here. It's a pretty simple mod, but really nice if you're rich and you like to spam beacons everywhere like I do. Next up is a mod that I actually don't use that much and isn't really much of an aesthetic mod, but it makes more sense to put it here than anywhere else. And that is do a barrel roll. What this mod does is give you like a unique way to fly around with your elytra that's a little bit more realistic. It's like you're actually gliding through the air with a wingsuit versus the normal kind of, Minecraft movement. And this mod's fun just to kind of play around with, do cool tricks with, and kind of just explore your world with, but doesn't really serve much of a practical purpose in any other way. Just kind of like a fun toy to play around with when you're bored. For this mod to work, however, you do need the cicada mod, which is another one of those mod dependencies like the ones I mentioned in the first section, but you only need it for this mod, so just make sure you get that if you want to use this one as well. And now finally, the last aesthetic mod I use is the skin override mod. This mod simply overrides the skins and capes of you or any other players in your world. This is how I have the Minecraft 2011 cape. No, I did not actually go to Minecon 2011, although I'm sure 7-year-old me would have absolutely loved to. This mod is how I apply skins to the wild spots that I sometimes use in the world to help with farms or whatever, as these aren't real accounts. This is just like a made up bot name and would just have the like normal Steve skin if it weren't for this mod. Otherwise, this mod is pretty basic. I don't really use it for anything besides the cape, as my normal skin is just my normal skin. And this mod is really only useful for like content creators, I'd say. The average person isn't probably going to get a lot of use out of this. And that does it for the aesthetic mods. Now it's time for the section of mods that actually serve a practical purpose in game. Section 3, the utility mods. Now for these mods, I'm going to try to give as detailed of a description as possible for how I use them personally, but I'm not going to go over every single feature all of these mods have to offer, as some of them have a lot, and this video would be over an hour long if I did every single one. So let's start with Litematica. Litematica is a building mod that projects a holographic schematic in your world, showing you where to place each block of a build. This makes the construction of massive detailed structures or complicated redstone machines 100 times easier, where in some cases it would almost be impossible without it. Now the way I use this mod is pretty much for those two things: complex redstone and detailed structures that I want to make sure I'm building correctly. But for those detailed structures, I always want to make sure I'm using my own builds and designs, as I want the world to be my own. So to show you how I do that, first let's start out with how do I get different schematics. Once the mod is installed and you've launched the game with it, you should find a folder in your Minecraft folder labeled schematics. If you don't have one, simply just create a folder in here and name it schematics. Here is where you'll store all of your .litematic files, and in order to get these, you can either create your own or download them online. Pretty much all of the complex redstone machines in my world, I mainly find through the different Minecraft technical discords, the technical Minecraft catalog, the Slimestone Tech Archive, and the Storage Tech Discord. These are the main ones, but you can find schematics in other places too. But these will have the schematics available to download, along with a description and sometimes instructions of how to build and operate whatever machine you're trying to work on. Then once you get a schematic and have it downloaded, you simply drag it into your schematics folder and you can immediately load it in your world. Simple as that. Now for non-redstone builds that I design myself in my creative world, I have to create the schematic myself. Now there's a couple ways to do this depending on the scenario. First, you need the Litematica tool, which by default is a stick, but by pressing M on your keyboard, which is the default key to access Litmatica's interface, you can go to configuration, generic, search tool, and change it to whatever you want, which I have set to a blaze rod, which is why you always see a blaze rod in my inventory in my videos, because it's the tool to load up a schematic. Then once you have your tool, by holding control and using scroll wheel, you can switch between the different modes. In creative, there's 9 modes, but in survival, I'm pretty sure there is just edit schematic, area selection, and schematic placement. To create a schematic, you got to be on area selection, and if you're just creating a basic single schematic, you want to be on the simple mode. Then just select your area with left click for one corner, right click for the other, and then when the block is filled in like this, you'll know that corner is selected. But if you want to select the other corner, simply look at it and middle click. Then by holding Alt and using your scroll wheel, you can move the corner to wherever you need it to be. You just want to encompass your entire build with the selection. Open your menu, go to Area Editor, and save schematic. This will save your current selection as a new schematic, which we'll just call house. Then by holding Control and scrolling to schematic placement, we can go back into our menu, load schematic, make sure the create a placement checkbox is ticked, and there you go, house. Now in creative, you can paste a schematic on number 5 by just pressing enter, and there you go, 2 things, boom. Now the other way to make a schematic is by switching the area selection mode to normal. And the way this works is you actually have to create a name in area instead of just selecting a single area. So go to area selection browser, new selection, and we'll call it house. Then what this does is allows you to create sub-regions of the schematic. So if I want, let's say, house to be just this centerpiece here, as you can see, I'm on sub-region house, which is the selection we just made. I create the selection like I just did in the simple mode, and then going back into that area selection browser, I can go to configure, new sub-region, and make a second one that we can call garden. Then with this selected, make sure it's selected. I just unselected it, so there's nothing listed. Then boom, has this little highlight around it. Now it's selected, and I can create a second selection just for this garden. Then we can do that one more time, new sub-region again, house wing, make sure it's selected, and we can select this last part of the house. Now we have these 3 sub-selections within one larger selection, that is house. So we can go into configure and save schematic. We can call this house 2, just because I don't want it to be the same name. Switch to schematic placement and load house 2. There we go. Now it looks exactly the same, just with these extra selections. And what you can do with these is go to schematic placements, and this will show the schematics that you have loaded, configure, and you can toggle on and off each selection. This can be useful for certain redstone machines that have like conflicting mechanisms that are like independent mechanisms that work together to do a thing. It really depends on what you're working on. 99% of the time, if you're just like a normal player, you're going to be using the simple mode, which of course is more simple. But depending on what you're doing, knowing how to do this can be very useful. And if you want this to go away, simply go back to the area selection browser, make sure your selection is selected, and just hit the minus button. So now you know where to get schematics and how to create them. Now let's say you want to build something. First, you need to collect all the materials needed for whatever build you're trying to build. And you can do that by going to your schematics, selecting the schematic you want to build, and clicking material list. This will show you exactly what you need to build the schematic. And if you want, you can turn on info HUD, which when the rendering for the schematic is enabled, which to toggle on and off is M+R by default. But when it's enabled, you get this nice list on your screen. So then I simply grab 2 stacks of cobblestone. It clears off the list, some oak planks, clears off the list, oak logs, and everything else you need for the build. Then once you have everything you need, I'm not going to bother getting the rest of these items. You can disable the list by just toggling it on and off again if you just want it to go away, and you can get to work building your schematic. Now, building it like this obviously seems kind of annoying since it's a bit difficult to see what you're missing versus not missing unless you're constantly toggling it on and off. So by opening your menu and going to configuration, render layers, you can set it to single layer and then choose which layer you want to have rendered. Then you can just flip through each layer one at a time as you go, making it real simple to build everything. Now, what if you're building something really big and you don't want to constantly be managing your inventory and making sure you're placing everything perfectly? Well, in that scenario, you can use easy place mode. What this does is automatically swap blocks that are in your inventory into your hand and place them on the schematic in the orientation that they're needed. So like this is facing upright and that's on the side. So let's say I have it toggled on. I can just click and place. This comes in super handy when you're building very large and repetitive structures, which I do frequently, and it would just be a mind-numbing experience if I didn't have this. Now, this isn't the same as using printer mode, which isn't a feature present in the normal Litematica mod, but is like an add-on to it, which basically places things around you in like an aura, like a very unnatural way to a point where you're pretty much not even playing the game anymore. This still requires you to at least aim in place in the right spots, although it does make it significantly easier. But it's not quite as OP as you'd think. If you're working on a big redstone machine like this, you really don't want to use easy place at all, and you want to make sure you're deliberately placing things with a little more intention. For example, if I was to build everything up layer by layer, I would place this observer before placing this rail, which would ping the observer, ping this piston, push this block, and can cause a whole bunch of unintended consequences that end up messing up a large portion of the machine. So while the mod does make building large redstone machines and complex structures significantly easier, you still have to use your brain a little bit to ensure that you build these things correctly. But that pretty much covers the mod. So let's move on to the next utility mod, Tweakaroo. Tweakaroo is just a collection of small game changes and tweaks that provide a ton of utility for serious builders. And unlike other mods, Tweakaroo doesn't really do one specific thing. So I'll kind of just scroll through all my settings and explain which ones I use, how I use them, and how they work. The generic fixes and list tabs are just different settings for the tweaks and yeets, while the hotkeys is obviously just hotkeys that toggle on different tweaks and yeets. Tweaks are like actual utility settings that have like a function in the game, where yeets are more like quality of life kind of fun-ish stuff, but I use a handful of both of them. So first off, we got accurate block placement, and this is what's required to have different block orientation placements that the mod provides, which I'll actually go over first because that's probably the most common use for this mod. So there's 5 block placement options, but I only use 4 of them. We've got rotation, offset, adjacent, and reverse. The most common one you'll see me use is adjacent. So let's say I want to place a block adjacent to another block, but I don't want to click on the side of that block like you normally would, I can hold left alt on my keyboard, which opens this little interface here for the center block, which is the block I'm looking at. Left, forward, right, backwards, whatever. And then by holding alt and clicking, I can place adjacent to that block. Then we've got offset, which offsets the block by 1 in any direction. So if I'm holding B on my keyboard, I get the same little interface. And if I do it on the right, it's at like an angle. So if I want to build up like this, I can do that instead of just wasting blocks by doing this. You can also place it above a block like that. You want to leave the bottom one open and just have it floating. Then we have rotation. So normally if I place a chest, it's facing towards me, but if I want it to like face away from me, like let's say I want the block to be facing the other direction, but I'm in a situation like this where I can't really get behind to place it like that, I can hold C and place it backwards, which is really useful when I'm working on redstone machines where a lot of placement orientation matters like that. And then similar to that orientation, we have the reverse option. So let's say I have a little ceiling part like this, and I want to place an observer in the opposite direction of this, but I don't have any adjacent blocks to do that with. And all I have is the flat ceiling block. I can hold X and it'll place the reverse orientation that is normally expected. All these options come in super handy when I'm building and save me a ton of time that I would otherwise have to use, you know, placing unnecessary scaffolding or bridging out or any other number of workarounds I would have to use instead. Now that's probably what I get the most use out of for this mod, but some of the other things that you've seen a lot of is tweak auto switch elytra. So what this does is just swap between my chest plate and my elytra. So I'm wearing my full chest plate right now, but when I'm in the air, if I press spacebar again, it'll automatically just flip. You could just do this manually like this, but I find it easier just to switch with that setting. Then we've got tweak type block break restriction. So what this does is restricts the blocks you're able to break relative to the corresponding list in your list category. So basically, if I am trying to mine for suspicious sand or gravel, or I'm trying to get amethyst shards, I can turn this on and I won't accidentally break the budding amethyst, which comes in really handy because breaking those things on accident is very annoying. So when I turn it on, I can break that, but I can never break this. It just won't break. It's like bedrock. Very, very nice feature. Then another big one that people ask a lot of questions about is tweak empty shulker boxes stack. So if a shulker box doesn't have anything in it, it's just empty, I can stack them. This is just a quality of life thing, and it really mainly helps with big systems that require shulker box loading. I don't have to have a huge tower with like 150 chests and hoppers reaching into the sky. I can just have one double chest with a hopper and then load it up with shulkers. This is honestly one of the things that is the least vanilla for my game, but it doesn't really change so much about the game that it really matters, in my opinion. It's just a really nice quality of life feature, so I have it on. Then we've got gamma override, which is just full bright. So if I press the period key on my keyboard, we can toggle full bright on and off. I actually don't use full bright very often. I mainly just have it for when I'm recording because it's, you know, really annoying to see in caves on video when it's super dark. YouTube's compression is already making it hard to see enough as it is, so having it be dark is just an unnecessary degradation in my video quality. So that's mainly what I use it for. Another thing is hand restock, which is really nice. So let's say I've got like, you know, some dirt in my inventory here and I'm just like placing a bunch of dirt for whatever reason. I can just do this and it'll automatically pull from my inventory if there is any to be pulled from. Again, another just nice quality of life feature. We've got lava visibility, which extends how much you can see under lava. It's not a crazy extension, but it's just enough that it makes it just easier if you're ever stuck under there for whatever reason, even though I can pretty much tank under lava for like ever with how good my armor is. I've also got tweak permanent sprint, which always makes you sprint if I'm moving forward. I don't have to press shift or anything like that. So I'm pretty much always sprinting. I mean, why do I need to walk anyway? I've always got food on me. I'm always trying to go as fast as possible, pretty much no matter what I'm doing. So we've got shulker box display, which allows me to see what's inside of a shulker box by pressing shift. Really nice. Swap almost broken tools, which does exactly what you think. I can't really give any examples right now, but when a tool is about to break, I think when it reaches 20 durability, it will basically not let me equip it if I try to use it. It'll just swap it out of my hand so I don't accidentally break any of my netherite tools. Same goes for armor as well. It'll swap off my boots if they get low, my elytra if it gets low, which can sometimes be dangerous because even if it has 20 durability left, it will make me plummet to my death if I'm flying through the air. So you got to be careful with that one. I also use tool switch sometimes as well, although I don't really use this one all the time, which is why I have it bound to be able to toggle on and off, which just automatically swaps to a tool in your hotbar that is suitable for breaking whatever you're looking at. So if I'm holding a chest and I try to break, it'll swap to my pickaxe and let me break. That one's really nice when you're mining and you run into patches of gravel or dirt or whatever and you want to swap to your shovel. Just does it for you. And that does it for the tweaks. But in the yeets category, I have double tap sprint disabled, which doesn't really matter because I have perma sprint on. I've disabled dead mob targeting. When you kill a mob, its hitbox remains in the game for like a fraction of a second. So if you were to like really quickly hit again, you might hit the hitbox of a dead mob and not hit what you're actually trying to hit. So that's just a quality of life feature. Disable nether fog is really nice because obviously your visibility in the nether weather is very limited in this game, but this completely fixes that. This was actually changed by Mojang, I'm pretty sure. I think you can open your inventory in a portal now, if I remember correctly. But before that, you could enable this to access your inventory while in another portal. Disable render distance fog. This I turn on and off every once in a while, depending on what I'm doing. Usually I'll leave the render distance fog on if I don't have Voxy enabled, but if I do have Voxy enabled, I'll disable it because you can kind of see it with the LODs, which doesn't look really good. Disable shulker box tooltip. This is like the list that shows you the items inside of a shulker box, which I disable because I can just see it by holding shift. So there's no reason to have that extra list. Disable shovel pathing makes it so you can't path with shovels. You can't create the path on grass. I'm spamming right click right now. I don't know if you can hear it. Can you hear it? I accidentally click left click. See, it just doesn't work. This is nice when I'm building or breaking and, you know, I don't want to create a path. And then finally, disable wall unsprint, which makes it so you don't stop sprinting when you hit a wall. Oh, actually, a couple more things I forgot to mention for Tweakaroo. By pressing my N key, I can toggle fast block placement. And what this does is when I'm using one of my offset block placement things, so let's say I'm doing adjacent block, I can just hold down and kind of bridge out really quickly. Same if I'm going up or doing anything really. There's also fast left click and fast right click. So fast left click, we'll just click really, it's kind of hard to show for left click. Left click super fast. This is honestly something I use more in creative. There's not really any point to fast left click in survival, but for fast right click, you place like, oh my God, also not that useful in survival. That one's good for like if you're trying to bone meal a bunch of stuff and you just want to hold down the button. I can't tell you how many times though I've accidentally had it on and just deleted a stack of fireworks though. So that's something you got to watch out for with that one. I can also toggle a permanent sneak, so I'm just always crouching. On the rare chance I'm in an ancient city or something, this is sometimes useful, I guess, if I just want to like not think about crouching. But there's also an option to fake sneak, which performs all the actions as if you were sneaking, but you're not. So I can't walk off edges or anything. And then additionally, there's fake sneak placement, which is a separate thing. So I can like right click on chests or whatever, and I won't open the chest, and instead I'll just place a block as if I was crouching, but I'm not. So that's helpful when I'm like doing redstone or whatever. And that pretty much does it for Tweakaroo. The block placement stuff is really the biggest there. And then maybe like tool switch and the elytra thing. Oh, and of course the shulker box stacking. Super, super useful mod. Definitely makes building a whole lot more fun. Next up, we've got a mod kind of related to Tweakaroo, and that is Shulker Fix. So with the shulker box stacking like this, if I had a line of hoppers going this way, it would take a ton of shulker boxes to fill up all of this, obviously. So what this mod does is if I put a stack of empty shulkers in the front, it will fill in the shulkers normally, meaning you don't need 50,000 shulkers to fully saturate a line of shulker box loaders or something like that. This is just a quality of life thing for redstone builds, and it saves me a whole lot on unnecessary shulker use. That's literally the whole mod though. Next up is Tweakermore. This mod is basically Tweakaroo 2. It adds a ton of extra stuff to the Tweakaroo mod, most of which I literally don't use at all and have no idea what it does. This is like a super, super, super technical mod. And I literally only downloaded it for one reason. It has this extra utility that works with the Litematica mod, auto collect material list item, which I have bound to my keypad divide key. So basically what this means is if I'm working on a schematic and I need to get materials to build whatever layer I'm working on, I can automatically pull the materials out of a chest or any container. So by toggling it on, it goes boop, pulls it out for me, and it only pulls out exactly the items I need that are available. Obviously there's nothing else in this box, so it only pulled the cobblestone. I pretty much have no use for this now that I use the cube loader machines, so I just do this all manually, but I still have the mod in the rare case that I actually need this feature. But for that feature to work, you also need the Itemscroller mod, which is the mod I'll go over next. Itemscroller makes managing items inside of inventories significantly easier. You can use your scroll wheel to move specific items very precisely to and from inventories. Scrolling up pushes it into the other inventory, and scrolling down pulls it from the other inventory. You can also hold shift and just drag over everything, which is super nice. You can hold shift and click in the other inventory to pull all items out of one inventory. You can hold control and shift and then press Q to drop all of one type of item out of an inventory. Just makes managing inventories a whole lot easier. Next, we've got MiniHUD, and what this mod does is kind of give you like an almost custom F3 screen. So you have these series of info lines where you can display a ton of different information for your game. So what I have displayed is the biome I'm in, the direction I'm facing, my coordinates, and then my frames. So by toggling it on, you can see in the top left there all that information, but this mod has a whole lot more to offer than just that. You can select individual structures to render their bounding boxes, and what a bounding box is the region that the game dedicates for this structure to spawn in. It's pretty technical. So for example, if I enable pillager outpost, there used to be a pillager outpost here, I can see the different regions where different things were meant to spawn. So the center structure is the actual outpost itself, which is how I lined up this farm so precisely. Basically, it's to be used for when you're trying to come up with farms farms and, you know, have spawning platforms that encompass an entire area that a certain mob can spawn. I got a lot of use out of this feature when I was working on my wither skeleton farm. Another feature I use relatively often is the beacon range. So if I turn this on, as you can see with all these green boxes, that's the range of a beacon effect, right? So if I want to line up 2 beacons across from each other, I can quickly see how far I need to go before I won't be in range to get the beacon's effects. And then another feature I use relatively often is the light level. So I can see exactly the light level of each block. When it has this yellow border around it, I believe that means it's exposed to skylight, where when the border is red, that means there's no skylight, and it's just whatever the light level is. This is good if you're spawn proofing an area. Obviously, I don't really have to worry about that anymore since I have the mob switches. But yeah, this mod just provides a ton of technical information for when you're doing, you know, fancy technical stuff. You can also create shapes with this mod. So like here's just a big circle. This can be nice for building if you don't like to use mods like Litematica. You can get an easy, perfect circle in game without having to Google like, you know, pixel circle generator website and then counting manually, which I know can be really annoying. Shapes have all these options. You can rotate them, you know, change the radius, all that. Very cool. Next, we've got Malilib, which is kind of a dependency mod required for Litematica, MiniHUD, and a few other things, but it does have a few settings that you can change manually. For example, the in-game message timeout I've set to 5 ticks, which is like a quarter of a second. So if I toggle anything on or off, as you can see, it very quickly fades away. And I like that because I just don't want it lingering on my screen for like, I think the default is like 3 or 4 seconds, which I just don't want to sit in there. I just want it to go away immediately. And so I think I changed that one, but I don't think I've really played with any of the other settings, which there isn't much of to begin with. But you need this for, I think, Litematica, MiniHUD, Tweakaroo, and Itemscroller. Yeah, so definitely make sure you get this one if you plan on using any of these other mods. Next up, we've got Carpet Mod, which has an insane amount of features, but I really only ever use 3 of them. First of which are the player commands. So let's say I'm AFKing at my Enderman farm. Instead of using something like an auto clicker, I can just type /player wilds attack and then the interval of ticks I want to attack on. So 12 is how long it takes for the sword to refresh. So then it just attacks automatically. For some reason, it doesn't play like the swinging animation of your sword, which looks a little weird, but it's just attacking like normal. And since you're doing it in the game instead of using a third-party auto clicker, the timings will be 100% consistent, which is good for some farms where you must attack or you must perform some action every specific number of game ticks. It's also just more convenient in my opinion. You can also use these commands for placing blocks. So let's say you want to use this concrete factory or something. You could have some powder in your hand and do /player wilds use interval, let's say every 10 ticks, and then every 10 ticks, it'll just place the block for you. Boom. So good for farms, AFKing stuff, or whatever other use case you could think of. The second thing I use this mod for is the wilds bots. So this is how I actually get them into the game. You can summon any real player you want. So just for example, let's do /player Tim. I'm sure somebody has the account name Tim, right? Spawn at boom, 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 and then Tim spawns in. And so whoever Tim is the skin he has. So it'll actually show the skin that's connected to that account. But you don't have to summon real players. Wildsbot-1 is not a real account that exists. At least I don't think it is, unless somebody bought it and used the name, which is why I have the skin override mod, because otherwise this is just like a default skin. But that's a useful thing for if you're trying to give a bot a custom name for whatever reason. And then the third thing I use Carpet Mod for is displaying this information up here. Normally you can only access this screen if you're playing on like a server or something by pressing tab, but I'm in a single player world, as you can see, and I have it set to log my ticks per second and my mob caps. So that number is 432 on the mob caps there because of my mob switch, which is why there's no mob spawning. And then Minecraft always runs at 20 ticks per second, and MSPT stands for milliseconds per tick, which means it takes 9 milliseconds for my computer to calculate 1 tick. So basically, if that MSPT number ever goes over 50, the ticks per second, that is the default 20 ticks per second, will begin to slow down, which is bad. That means there's a lot of lag in your world. But 9 is pretty good. So that's why I have that, just to keep track of that information. So if I notice any lag, I can kind of figure out what's going on there. Now, to use all of these mods, in survival mode, you won't be able to with commands off. But I'll show you how to do it with the commands off so you don't have to enable cheats or anything like that. To start, first, enable cheats. You only have to do it once though, so you can immediately disable it just by leaving the world. To enable the player commands, type /carpet command player true, and then you'll be prompted to change this permanently, which you want to click yes for, which means you will always be able to use these commands whenever you log into this world. So now you can summon players, use the player commands to AFK farms, all that good stuff. And to get the information for your tab key with the ticks per second and mob caps, type /carpet default loggers mob cap TPS. Click to change it permanently as well, and boom, then when you relog in the world, there you go. Commands are off, so you don't have to worry about any of that. that it's still single player. As you can see, everything pauses when I pause, and you can summon your bots, use your attack commands, and of course see that information on your tab screen. Carpet also has a ton of other functionality outside of those just main 3 things that I use it for. So if you're interested, as of just checking out this video on it to see if there's any other tools or whatever that you might get some use out of. Next, I've got 2 mods that I wanted to put in the aesthetics category, but I think is definitely more of a utility mod. And that is the mods Xaeros Minimap and Xaeros World Map. In order to use Xaeros World Map, you need Xaeros Minimap. So you probably just want to have both, but I get a lot more use out of the world map than the minimap. I can toggle the minimap on and off with my shift key, but I don't really need it very much. So I pretty much always leave it off. But by pressing M, I can open my world map and see everything in my world. This mod is just a super nice quality of life tool. I can see everything I've built, and I have a list of custom markers I've made that I can toggle on and off to see in world where everything is. So if I enable everything, look, I can see 180 meters away, the city, Guardian Farm is over there, Gas Farm is over there. It's just nice for labeling things and organizing your world. Although you do have to explore everything to load the map. So I think because I used Chunky, I was able to load all of this stuff. I don't think I did not explore all of this manually. Plus, as you can see, it's like a perfect flat border at the edge versus like someplace over here, which I've been to. So yeah, just a cool mod to see your world. There's a bunch of options to see like different entities and stuff, but I disabled all of them. I really only care about this mod for looking at my stuff. So yeah, pretty nice. Next up, we've got Ortho Camera. What this mod does is toggles a orthogonal camera view for you to view your world in. But as you can see, there's a couple issues conflicting with some other mods that we have. One, better clouds kind of obscures your vision a little bit since they get in the way of the camera, but that obviously can be easily solved by just disabling clouds. But the other is the block face culling optimization of sodium. So this is what you're not seeing when you have that setting enabled, but it's what's giving you a pretty sizable performance boost. When using the camera, you can easily fix it by just disabling that setting, but of course you are going to take that extra performance hit as a result. So depending on how often you use this, you can decide if that's something you want to do or not. You can see my little players down there, so you can actually play like this. You can zoom in and out, although I don't know why you would want to play like this. This seems not exactly optimal, but I mainly use it just to take a quick look at whatever build I'm working on to kind of just get a bird's eye view instantly without having to fly in the air with my elytra or whatever, right? It's pretty cool. It's got a bunch of options that you can tweak. I won't go through all of them, but if you want to use it, just kind of play around with it until you find the settings that you like. You can also set different keybinds for different operations when you're using it as well. Next up, we've got another camera related mod, and that is Camera Utils. What this mod does is give you like an alternative third-person view. So while the normal third-person view is just, you know, like this, that we're all familiar with Camera Utils, I can make it something like this. It's a little more off-centered, and I can customize to move it around however I want. So let's say I want some type of like really high off the ground drone POV third-person view kind of thing. I can set it up like that, kind of get just an alternative angle. I like this mod sometimes if I'm like flying a really far distance. I can get this really unique view as I'm heading to whatever destination I'm going to. This is also the mod that allows me this type of zoom function. So instead of just like instantly cutting into a zoomed perspective, it has kind of this animation like the spyglass, but obviously not as obtrusive. And while I'm holding in zoom using a scroll wheel, I can change how much I zoom, which is really nice for like kind of content creator-esque stuff where I'm kind of, you know, I want to do this little zoom in, like I'm talking to the camera, what's up? Or of course, if I just want to look at something far away in the distance, like normal. And now that pretty much does it for all of the utility mods. There are 3 left though, but these aren't really important for like my normal survival world, but they are important for me as a content creator and also if you're trying to plan and design cool stuff. First of the 3 being Flashback. What this mod does is records your game session and anything that happens in it while you're recording. And then when you're finished recording, it saves the files for you in this list and you can see the duration of them and give them a name when you're finished recording. This is how I capture all the time-lapse footage that you see in my videos and any cool like cinematic shots. Once you've captured a segment, you open it like a normal world and you're opened up to a menu like this. Now, if you're familiar with any editing software, you could probably find your way around this pretty quickly, but if you're not, it may seem a little bit confusing. Down here is your timeline, so dragging this bar across drags you live through the events of whatever you did. So I was working on my new storage system. So as you can see, it's slowly getting built up here as I drag through. And over here, you have a bunch of different options. So one thing you'll notice a lot is in my time lapses, the sky doesn't really change a lot. But as you can see right now, there's rain, it's daytime, nighttime, daytime, nighttime. But if I override the time, I can set it to a specific point in the day. Let's say like, you know, maybe like a little like 11 a.m.-ish. And I can take the weather and completely disable it. This way you won't get like any obtrusive flashing from, you know, it being day and night constantly super quick or any like rain starting or anything like that. And it's just, you know, very clean and consistent. You can also override your FOV, which can make for cooler shots. Again, all depending on what you're trying to do. There's night vision, which this isn't full bright. This is like normal Minecraft night vision. So depending on the situation, like right now, full bright through Tweakaroo is on, but I can disable it and then we can turn on night vision, which leaves these little warm spots from other lights, which I don't really like very very much. So if I ever need to use night vision, I'm just going to use like the normal Tweakaroo override instead of the Flashback one. There's also things like a rule of thirds guide, which is really nice. Makes it easier to line up the composition of a shot. You can override the fog. I can make it really hazy like this so you can't see very far, or I can like extend it super far out to where there's basically no fog at all. There's a ton of other options too that you can play around with if you want. Down here, you can add keyframes. So if I want to move my camera, let's say I put a keyframe here. So the camera starts in this position, and then in 10 seconds, we'll do like 4 seconds. In 4 seconds, I want to move it over here. Place another keyframe, go back to the starting keyframe, and then when I play, the camera moves. Very nice. You got time lapses. You can change the speed, time of day. There's so much stuff you can do with this mod. There's full in-depth guides online, but I'm not going to really go into every single setting. I'm mainly using this for time-lapse shots anyway. I'm not really doing too much cinematic production. All my stuff is pretty basic. Now, one thing I will mention though that might actually be useful to other content creators if they're watching is right now, as you can see, there's no Voxy showing, but Voxy is enabled. So how do I make it so I can see Voxy in these flashback settings? Well, it's supposed to link automatically for whatever world the flashback file is linked to, so it should link directly to my hardcore world. But the reason it's not is because I started this recording with Voxy disabled. In order for Voxy to be in the flashback, Voxy needs to be enabled when the recording starts. But there's an easy fix for this. Right here on this Voxy test, as you can see, my LODs are showing because I made sure to link it properly. So if I want the LODs to show up in that other file, I simply go to my Minecraft folder, go to flashback, replays, navigate the correctly linked file, which would be this Voxy test here, open it up, and I use WinRAR, so my interface looks a little bit different for zipped files. So you may need to unzip the file and then rezip the file depending on your own setup. But for me, I can just go to metadata, and at the very bottom here, we see the Voxy storage path. This is what's basically pointing the flashback file to use the correct Voxy renders. So we can take this text here, copy it, close out of this file, find our file that doesn't work properly, which was here, go to the metadata in this file, scroll to the bottom, highlight the empty portion where the Voxy link should be, paste in the correct Voxy link, file, save, close. Do you wish to update the modified file in the archive? Yes, close that. And then when we go back into that file, as you can see, we can now see our distant Voxy renders. Now, one thing to note about this though, and I discovered this last episode when I was working on the big spire, the Voxy render that's being displayed is linked to your current Minecraft world, right? So for example, I was editing all of my flashback renders after I finished building all the spires. And so when I would link the Voxy file to the flashback footage, it would show the spire even though the spire wasn't yet built, which obviously creates some continuity errors in your video if your completed project is visible before you build it. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. So you can easily get around this by just making backups of your world while you're working on a video. Again, this is just for content creators, really. Average player, you don't got to worry about this. So for example, I've got some continuity saves of my world that I can jump back to if I need to capture footage from the past, essentially. So just thought I'd throw that out there because I found that useful. The next two mods I only use in creative mode when I'm designing stuff for videos. The first of which being Axiom. This is probably the most powerful building mod that the game currently has to offer. And this mod pretty much single-handedly has carried my channel over any other mod in this video. I would not have been able to improve my building skills and design things as quickly as I am able to do now without this mod. So there's two kind of ways it works. One, you have this in-game thing. As you can see, there's a new hotbar slot on the bottom right there. And this gives you a bunch of options. So option number one is move. So if I want to place a block, I can left click for the first point, right click for the second point, and I could just move the block. You can do this on any scale. So if I have more blocks like this, corner one, corner two, and then scroll wheel to move. You get this little arrow kind of showing you what direction it's going in based on where you're looking. And then there you go. The second one here is to clone stuff. So just like the move, first corner, second corner, but instead of moving it, it just clones a new one. So right clicking will place a single one down, and you can do this as many times as you want, and then left click to deselect. The second one here is stack, which will take your selection and stack it next to itself. So those two things become these two things, and then I can just do that a bunch. So that's nice for larger areas. Then we've got smear, which unlike clone, doesn't just duplicate whatever your selection is, but it duplicates it right on top of itself. So it literally just drags the whole thing out. I've pretty much never used this setting, to be honest, but I'm sure there's some creative use cases where you could use it. Then we've got extrude, which will basically take any surface and bump it out by one. So right click to expand it, which will pull this section of wood blocks out like that. I can do the same here, 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 but it's not moving it. It's just duplicating it. So now there's two pieces here. And then at the top here, we've got one you'll use all the time, which is erase. So you can select 2 points like this, hit the delete key and to delete it. You can also just right click, which will delete all of these same of one block touching itself. So it deletes that entire rim of smooth stone since they were all connected to itself. And then you've got setup symmetry. And the way this symmetry works is you place a point that you want to have symmetrical and then hold control and press F if you want the symmetry this way. And then make sure you're facing in the direction to rotate it wherever you want. You can have it be 4-way symmetry or just like a normal 2-way. And now, since it's like this, based on which side of the block I'm placing on, I can do this and it places it symmetrically. I've actually never really used this one very much, but it is very cool. And if you're placing in the middle where the block is, obviously it just won't place anything. It's also got rotational symmetry, which I've actually never used. So we're about to find out together how this works. Ooh, okay. That's pretty cool. Okay, nice. So as you can see, there's a lot of options here and you can really build some cool stuff very quickly once you get good with this mod. So for example, actually, just with these basic tools here, let's say I want to build a cool looking bridge. I'll start with a diamond block, place a single one down, create a stack. We'll move it 25 blocks that way, 25 blocks that way, and 50 blocks up. Then let's say I want to cut out this middle section here. I can take the erase, go to this side. We'll leave 4 blocks on the left. We'll leave 4 blocks on the right, go here. And then actually, let's say you click 2 points, but you actually want it to be larger. You can middle click to pull the selection up to that point while leaving the 2 original points, which allows you to tweak your selection very easily without having to click for a new corner, which is a little different than the selections for something like Litematica, but I honestly think this one's a lot easier to manage. Then let's say I delete this middle part here and I want to make like a kind of a curved thing like this. I can hollow out this section. And then with the extrude tool, I can just push it through, instantly giving us this archway kind of thing. Then with the clone tool, I can take this, select the top there, bring it down and just clone the whole thing over. And even better with the stack tool, I can do the same thing, but way faster. And just like that, I have this huge kind of bridge in like less than 30 seconds if I wasn't talking. Now, a diamond bridge obviously is not a thing that you want to build, but the reason I use diamonds is because Axiom actually has 2 different modes. This gameplay mode where you're just in your normal first person kind of normal Minecraft perspective, but you can switch to the editing mode, which is a little bit more complicated. It may look very daunting at first, but I promise you everything here is pretty simple. And once you get the hang of it, you can do so much. So by using one colored block like this, I typically like to use a bright block just so it's easier to, see. You can press the M key to open up your select tool and you can just select all of one block. Then with something like the noise painter tool, I can select one of my presets, which I have like a stone gradient for. Let's change it to white. So this is kind of what the gradient will look like. And now I can make this big selection circle here and just paint the whole thing to be now made of stone. And it's got this randomized gradient along with it. So as you can see, extremely powerful tool for designing stuff. And now for my last mod that I use for designing stuff is World Edit, which honestly, because of how powerful Axiom is, I'm not really using this one that much anymore, but I do still have it because there's like a couple things that it's better for. I think it has features to like hollow things and also to make certain types of rocks and stuff where it just performs better than Axiom. But 99% of the time I'm using Axiom at this point. I just have this just because I always have. So, and that pretty much does it. That's all the mods I use, how I use them, and how I play Minecraft. There you go. Again, any updates to this list will be outlined in the description. And if I missed anything important, let me know in the comments and I'll update that in the description as well. Thanks for watching. Check out the Patreon if you want to support me and get a hardcore world download, but that's going to do it. See you guys later. Bye-bye.